Ladies and gentlemen, today's featured segment is presented to you by Radioactive Redhead. From Book 2 of the Warlock series, author Mike Bennett brings to life tales from distant lands, detailing the undertakings of special operators as they pursue an Iranian-funded menace. Operators roam from Kurdistan to Pakistan, and no stone is left unturned in Turkey. Will justice be brought to close the ledger for the tragic 1983 Beirut bombing? Join us as we present to you When Towers Fall.
Chapter 15. 200 kilometers away in the Negev, Danny and Jacob reunited for their own round-robin of refresher training. For the next 2 months, these two would practice some of the darker arts of espionage, a world where the Israelis developed far more successfully than any other U.S. ally. The two were brought together to perform one single task, a task that both the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel agreed was long overdue: the assassination of Imad Fayez Mugniya. Here in the baking heat they could see the southern slopes of Mount Hebron, on which the Yetur forest was planted. Far away in the distance stood dense stands of Aleppo pine, girding the hillsides in vivid contrast to the dune-colored Negev desert. It seemed so peaceful in contrast to the task they performed with live materials: Semtex, C4, RDX, or other variations of plastic explosive. Over and over they rehearsed scenarios, fabricating and affixing bombs of immense power and cunning. The Warlock was quite aware all parameters were set. It was not his place to usurp the team leader. His role was strategy, and creating the necessary alliance to set the conditions, not add a superfluous layer of oversight. On the 12th of February 2008, a car bomb blast shook the Kafir Susa neighborhood of Damascus, Syria. Beneath the debris and dust, severed limbs and ruptured organs were obliterated into an unrecognizable lump of fused tissue. DNA would later confirm the identification, but 18 meters away from ground zero, freshly peeled from the skull and splayed flat on the ground, lay the face of Imad Fayez Mugniya. Chapter 17. His ponderings on the greater opportunity, afforded by the Arab Spring, aside, the developing intransience and recalcitrant Turkey and an administration obsessed with creating a narrative for re-election repressed, the Warlock himself was focused on a task that was delicate and required greater attention. He had set this into play years ago in the previous administration, and now it was in its endgame stage. It was merely due to the timing and maturation of the implementing technology that the ploy was now coming to fruition. He knew also that the human infrastructure to create the opportunity was an exceptionally long time in its creation, and now that all these elements were aligning, the execution of the last act could finally begin. The alliance required to pull it off had been developed over years and only recently fully consummated. The time was now. He and his counterpart overseas fully concurred. The chess pieces were set. The time for the rooks and pawns was past. It was time to place the king in check. Danny and Jacob had exited the commercial Lafasa Airbus 310 from Radia at 37,000 feet AGL. With the flight plan and wind accounted for, they would still be 70 miles off target. So they had jumped with 2 Rokon Trailbreaker 2-wheel all-terrain vehicles off the modified Airbus. The entire aircraft modification and other arrangements with Luftwaffe had taken Mossad nearly 5 years. They carried water, but no weapons of any real sort. If they were caught, they were not fighting their way out of this. They were on their own. They did carry an object of some great interest, however. They carried a rather large rock indigenous to the lava formations of the target area. Of course, it was not merely a rock, only cleverly engineered to look like one and hide the contents within. The guts of the rock held the electronics battery and antenna of a device that could be interrogated and authenticated by a special radar waveform, and then act as a relay to release payload download from space through the device, then onto the receiver conduit inside the facility to the downstream interface. Their job was to place and orient the rock at a precise spot, in the middle of the desert, at the Natanz nuclear facility right smack dab in the middle of Iran, a means to deliver a worm called Stuxnet. Chapter 19. The warlock continued his research and found the new Turkey-Russia pipeline was to be called Turkstream and would not only enjoin endpoints between Kyoki, Turkey and Apna, Russia, but an overland pipeline serving Iran and Kyoki was also being surveyed. The Kint's operational architecture would not be abandoned, merely replicated. The advantage would be a diplomatic solution with Germany, would be possible under a different administration if sanctions were sought. The downside was, of course, additional expenditures and a lag in time. This was outweighed by the opportunity to cause a rift between the coalescing Iran, Russia, Turkey, Troika. Accordingly, he issued new instructions.
If this preview broadcast has piqued your curiosity, the book in its entirety will be available for purchase from Amazon.com. Simply search When Towers Fall by Mike Bennett and peruse a catalogue of his latest works. Be sure to tune in to Radioactive Redhead to hear further excerpts from the Warlock series. This concludes today's featured segment from Radioactive Redhead. May your days be filled with good memories and laughter, and God bless.